You aren't releasing the full Epstein files, including the names of people who were involved in the sex ring that you promised to do before you became FBI director.
I just told you, I'm not going to release downloaded porn of
I'm
children
not asking
on the
about
internet.
that. Fine. I'm asking about all the other files.
What other videos? Tell me. Tell me.
That's what I'm asking.
Tell me.
You're saying there are no videos that would be relevant to anyone else involved in the Jeffrey Epstein sex ring.
Pursuant to Mr. Acosta's collection of information based on the search warrants. That's all we have in our possession.
And I'm asking you that stuff.
That's all we got.
I'm not asking all you got. I'm asking you in that stuff. There's nothing that's related to to any other sex traffic, any other people engaged with Epstein in underage sex.
That's correct. To my knowledge, no.
Okay. Let's talk about the witness interviews. 302s of witness interviews. Those are not subject to the court order. Those are not subject to any fictional sealed order for a search warrant. Why aren't you releasing those with the redacted names of the victims?
We are releasing as much as legally allowed. That's why we went back to the courts.
How is that not legally allowed?
Sir, do you know how court orders work? Do you know how protective orders
Actually,
work? Do you know how
Mr.
sealing
Patel,
orders
I was
work?
a real prosecutor for 10 years. I know exactly how
so I was a
court
fake one?
orders. And I want to understand what the court order prevents you.
37 seconds ago, Dan Goldman did something that made FBI Director Kash Patel's hands visibly shake on live television. In a packed House committee room with every major network camera pointed directly at the witness table, the former prosecutor from New York asked one simple question that would expose the biggest cover-up in FBI history. Mr. Patel, does Donald Trump appear anywhere in the Epstein files? The room went dead silent. That kind of crushing silence where you can hear the air conditioning hum and camera shutters clicking because everyone in that room knew this wasn't just another routine question. This was Goldman setting a trap, and Patel was about to walk straight into it. You could see it in Patel's face immediately. The slight pause, the way his eyes shifted for just a microsecond before he responded. That telltale sign of someone who's been caught completely off guard. I'm sorry, could you say that again? But here's what makes this absolutely explosive. Goldman didn't buy the deflection for even a second. He's a former federal prosecutor who spent 10 years building cases against organized crime. He knows when someone is stalling for time. It's not a complicated question. Does Donald Trump appear anywhere in the Epstein files? And that's when everything started to unravel for Kash Patel. Patel's shoulders tensed. His left hand moved instinctively to his water glass, a self-soothing gesture that screams psychological stress. His confident posture disappeared, replaced by the rigid stance of a man who just realized he's walked into an ambush. Behind him, his 3 FBI lawyers shifted forward simultaneously, exchanging glances and whispering urgent advice. Their carefully rehearsed talking points were useless. Let me back up and paint the picture. House Judiciary Committee hearing room, packed wall to wall. This was supposed to be routine FBI oversight, budget discussions, standard congressional theater where Republicans would praise Patel and Democrats would criticize him. Everyone reads their prepared statements and goes home. That is not what happened. What nobody knew was that Goldman had spent 3 weeks in a secure Capitol basement room, poring over classified documents. Sources say he barely slept, surviving on coffee and determination. This wasn't just preparation. This was a prosecutor building a case. The night before, Goldman's staff tried talking him out of the Epstein questioning. Too risky, they said. But Goldman had seen something in those files that changed everything. Dan Goldman walked into that hearing room with a thin file folder and the look of a man who had spent weeks preparing for exactly this moment. Goldman doesn't ask questions unless he already knows the answers, and he definitely doesn't bring up Jeffrey Epstein unless he's about to destroy someone's career. Patel tried to recover with bureaucratic language, the kind of smooth, practiced deflection he's perfected over months of congressional hearings. We have released where President Trump's name's in the Epstein files and everybody else, and all credible information that we are legally allowed to release has been released. But Goldman was ready for this. He's been waiting for this exact moment. And here's what makes Goldman so dangerous. He's not just another congressman reading prepared questions. This is a man who spent 10 years as a federal prosecutor, who built RICO cases against mob bosses, who knows how to corner a witness and force them to tell the truth. He had studied every word of Patel's previous testimony, every legal excuse, every bureaucratic dodge. You could see it in his posture. While other committee members shuffled papers and checked their phones, Goldman sat perfectly still, his eyes never leaving Patel's face. He was reading micro-expressions, watching for tells, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. So, let's go through that. You're referring to court orders that prohibit you from releasing grand jury testimony under Rule 6E. Is that what you're referring to when you say, "as the law allows"? And here's where it got interesting. Patel started to sweat, not literally, but you could see it in his body language. The confident FBI director who had been smoothly handling questions for the past hour suddenly looked like a man who realized he was trapped. That's a piece of it. Really? What other evidence do those 3 court orders you cited prohibit from being released? This is where Goldman showed why he's one of the most dangerous questioners in Congress. He had done his homework. He knew exactly which court orders Patel was referencing. He knew what they actually said. And he knew Patel was lying about their scope. The next few minutes were a masterclass in how to methodically dismantle someone's credibility on live television. Goldman pressed on the videos. He pressed on the witness statements. He pressed on why the FBI wasn't going back to court to unseal records. Goldman wasn't attacking randomly. Every question built on the previous answer, systematically closing off every escape route Patel might use. First, he established Patel claimed to be releasing everything legally possible. Then, he challenged the legal basis. Then he forced Patel to admit the restrictions didn't actually apply to many documents. But the moment that will be replayed on every news channel tonight was when Goldman cut through all of Patel's legal deflections with surgical precision. I'm asking about why you aren't releasing the full Epstein files, including the names of people who were involved in the sex ring that you promised to do before you became FBI director. The promise. Goldman had brought up the promise Patel made during his confirmation hearings. The promise that made him FBI director in the first place. The promise he'd been systematically breaking for months. Patel tried to deflect again, talking about downloaded pornography and search warrant limitations, but Goldman wouldn't let him escape. I'm not asking about that. I'm asking about all the other files. What other videos? Tell me. And this is where something extraordinary happened. For the first time in months of hearings, Kash Patel looked genuinely cornered. His usual smooth deflections weren't working. His legal justifications were falling apart under Goldman's relentless questioning. That's all we have in our possession. But Goldman pressed harder. I'm asking you, in that stuff, there's nothing that's related to any other people engaged with Epstein in underage sex? That's correct. To my knowledge, no. To his knowledge. Those 3 words might have just ended Patel's career, because either he's lying or he's admitting he doesn't know what's in the most high-profile case files in FBI history. Then came the knockout punch. Goldman shifted to witness statements, FBI 302 interview reports, documents that definitely aren't covered by grand jury secrecy rules or search warrant limitations. But here's what most people don't understand about FBI 302s. They're the detailed reports agents write after interviewing witnesses. Every question, every answer, every detail is recorded. And in the Epstein case, there are hundreds of them. Witnesses who saw things, witnesses who were trafficked, witnesses who can name names. The FBI has been sitting on these interviews for years, and Goldman knew it. Why aren't you releasing those with the redacted names of the victims? The room shifted. Republican members started looking uncomfortable. They knew Goldman was onto something big. Even Jim Jordan, Patel's biggest defender, was staring at his notes instead of making eye contact with the FBI director. We are releasing as much as legally allowed. How is that not legally allowed? This exchange might seem technical, but it was devastating. Goldman was systematically destroying every legal justification Patel had for keeping these files secret. Grand jury materials, not applicable to witness interviews, search warrant limitations, doesn't cover victim statements, court orders, show me which specific order prevents release. We are releasing as much as legally allowed. How is that not legally allowed? And this is where Patel made his fatal mistake. Instead of providing a legal justification, he got defensive. He started lecturing Goldman about how court orders work. Sir, do you know how court orders work? Do you know how protective orders work? Wrong move. Completely wrong move. The moment Patel started lecturing a former federal prosecutor about court procedures, he lost whatever credibility he had left. You could see it in Republican faces, the dawning realization that their guy was drowning. Patel's voice changed too. Gone was the smooth, authoritative tone. Now he sounded defensive, like a teenager caught in a lie. Goldman's response was devastating. Actually, Mr. Patel, I was a real prosecutor for 10 years. I know exactly how. The emphasis on real prosecutor was a direct shot. Goldman was reminding everyone in that room that, unlike Patel, he'd actually spent a decade in courtrooms building criminal cases. He knew what he was talking about. The final moments of Goldman's questioning were brutal. As his time expired, he delivered the accusation that will follow Patel for the rest of his career. You are hiding the Epstein files, mister. You are part of the cover-up. The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot, because that's exactly what they were. A direct accusation that the FBI director was actively covering up evidence in the most high-profile trafficking case in American history. Patel tried to respond, his voice strained with barely contained anger. Any allegations that I'm a part of a cover-up to protect child sexual trafficking and victims of human trafficking and sexual crimes is patently and categorically false. But the damage was done. Goldman had systematically dismantled every legal justification Patel had offered. He'd exposed the contradictions in his testimony. He'd forced him into defensive positions that made him look guilty. And most importantly, he'd put the accusation on the record. In a public congressional hearing, captured by every camera in the room, Kash Patel is covering up the Epstein files. Within minutes, the clip was everywhere. Goldman destroys Patel over Epstein cover-up, trending worldwide. Legal experts calling it the most damaging congressional testimony since Watergate. But the real damage was happening behind closed doors. Within hours of the hearing, FBI agents were reportedly reaching out to congressional investigators. Whistleblowers who had been silent for months suddenly found their courage. Career agents who had watched Patel systematically bury the Epstein investigation were finally ready to speak. The hashtag #release. The Epstein files hit 2 million tweets in 6 hours. Victim advocacy groups that had been fighting for transparency for years suddenly had a champion in Goldman. Legal experts were calling for special prosecutors and independent investigations. And in FBI headquarters, sources tell me, Patel spent the evening in emergency meetings with his lawyers. Because Goldman hadn't just embarrassed him, he'd created a political firestorm that couldn't be contained. Republican senators who had been defending Patel for months suddenly went silent. Conservative media outlets that usually rush to defend Trump appointees were running clips of Goldman's questioning without commentary. The silence was deafening, and in Washington, silence from your allies is the most dangerous sound of all. Legal experts were already predicting that Goldman's questioning would be used as evidence in future investigations. Every contradiction Patel made, every evasive answer, every moment of visible panic, it was all on the record now, preserved forever in congressional testimony that prosecutors could reference for years to come. Because this wasn't about partisan politics. This was about a fundamental question of accountability. Why is the FBI director hiding evidence in a child trafficking case? What names are in those files that are so explosive they can't be released? The answers to those questions are coming. Because Goldman didn't just destroy Patel's credibility today, He set up subpoenas, investigations, and congressional demands that will force the truth into the open. 37 seconds. That's all it took for Dan Goldman to ask the question Kash Patel couldn't answer. And in those 37 seconds, the biggest cover-up in FBI history started to crumble. The files are still hidden, but now everyone knows they're being hidden. And in Washington, once the cover-up is exposed, the truth has a way of coming out whether the FBI director wants it to or not.